It was one of those evenings in early fall when the air is crisp but not yet cold, when the world seems to pause between the rush of day and the stillness of night. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, while streetlights flickered on one by one. Suburban lawns were quiet, curtains drawn, families inside preparing dinner. The faint hum of cars passed along the main road, mixed with the steady chorus of crickets beginning their nightly song. Michael sat behind the wheel of his old sedan, shoulders slouched, sleeves rolled up, his tie tugged loose around his neck. His day at the office had stretched on longer than it should have. Missed calls, back-to-back meetings, and endless emails had drained him. He longed for nothing more than to get home, reheat the leftover pasta waiting in the fridge, and put his feet up. For once, he didn't want to think about deadlines or responsibilities. He just wanted quiet. But as he slowed near the bus stop at the corner of Maple and Pine, his eyes caught a figure that made him ease off the gas. An elderly man stood alone under the buzzing light of the bus shelter. His back was bent, his movements slow. In his hands were two oversized grocery bags, brown paper, stuffed to the brim with cans and boxes, straining at the edges as if ready to split apart. The man's arms trembled from the weight, his thin legs wobbling as he set the bags down for a moment of relief. His chest heaved as he bent over, steadying himself, then, determined, he lifted them again and tried to shuffle forward. Michael's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. He glanced at the clock. He was already late. He had promised a friend he'd stop by that evening, and he knew if he didn't get moving, he'd have to explain himself again. He could have easily kept driving. After all, it wasn't his problem. Someone else might come along. The bus could arrive any minute. But something in his gut whispered otherwise. Something about the way the old man struggled, so proud, yet so clearly exhausted, tugged at Michael's conscience. He slowed the car, pulled over to the curb, and rolled down the passenger side window. "Sir, do you need some help?" Michael asked, his voice calm but sincere. The old man turned his head slowly. His eyes, pale blue and a little cloudy with age, widened slightly at the sight of Michael. For a second, pride seemed to hold him back. Then he forced a faint smile. I'll manage. But thank you." Michael knew that tone. It was the voice of someone who had learned to rely on no one, who hated feeling like a burden. He didn't hesitate. He stepped out of his car, straightened his shirt, and walked toward him. "It's really no trouble," Michael said gently. He reached down and lifted the grocery bags as though they weighed nothing. "Please, let me give you a hand." The old man opened his mouth as if to argue, then sighed and nodded. "Well, if you insist." Michael grinned. "I do." At that moment, under the dim glow of the streetlight, two lives crossed paths in a way neither man could have predicted. To Michael, it was just a small gesture of kindness, an instinct, nothing more. But in truth, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Because what Michael didn't know was that this chance encounter was about to unravel a secret he wasn't ready for. And as he helped load the groceries into his car, Michael had no idea that the man he was helping was far more connected to his life than he could ever imagine. But how could helping a stranger at a bus stop lead to a revelation so personal, so life-changing, that it would shake Michael to his core? That is what we'll uncover next. Michael slid the groceries into the back seat of his car, then opened the passenger door for the elderly man. "Come on, let's get you home," he said warmly. The man hesitated, one hand gripping the frame of the door as though climbing into a stranger's car was too much to accept. But then his shoulders slumped, and with a tired sigh, he lowered himself onto the seat. As Michael buckled himself in and started the car, he glanced over. "I'm Michael," he offered, breaking the silence. The old man gave a faint nod. "Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker," he replied, his voice gravelly yet polite. The engine hummed as they pulled away from the bus stop. For a moment, the ride was quiet except for the turn signal ticking softly. Then Michael tried again. "So, you don't live too far from here?" No, Mr. Whitaker said, staring out the window at the passing houses. "Just a few blocks down. Normally I walk. But these bags, well, I thought I could handle them." His words trailed off, leaving the weight of unspoken loneliness in the air. Michael smiled lightly. "We all need a hand sometimes. No shame in that. Mr. Whitaker chuckled, though it was brief and hollow. Not many people stop anymore. Everyone's in such a rush these days. As they drove, Michael noticed small details. The way Mr. Whitaker's hands shook slightly as he folded them in his lap, the careful way he chose his words, like a man used to being alone with his thoughts. He didn't mention a wife. Didn't mention children. Just gave directions in short sentences. Left here, second house on the right. When they pulled into the driveway of a modest, weathered home, Michael parked and hopped out to grab the groceries. The house had a certain charm but also an air of neglect. Peeling paint on the shutters, weeds pushing through the cracks in the walkway. Not abandoned, but clearly kept up by someone who could no longer do it all. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood and books. The furniture was neat, almost too neat, like no one had sat in the armchairs for years. The walls were lined with framed photos, but most were landscapes and buildings, not people. Michael set the bags down on the kitchen counter. "There you go," he said. "Safe and sound." Mr. Whitaker leaned against the counter, breathing hard from the short walk inside. "You didn't have to do this. Really. But, thank you." Michael smiled. "Like I said, no trouble. You sure you'll be all right now?" "Yes, yes," the man said, though his voice betrayed exhaustion. Then, almost as if by accident, he added, "Thank you, son." The word hung in the air. Michael's brow furrowed, caught off guard. "Son," he repeated, half laughing. Mr. Whitaker blinked quickly, as if realizing what he had said. "Just a figure of speech," he said softly, brushing it off with a wave of his frail hand. "Old habits." Michael didn't press. He smiled, wished him a good night, and headed out the door. But as he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that had settled in his chest. Something about Mr. Whitaker stayed with him. His loneliness, his pride, the slip of the word son. It was just one act of kindness, Michael told himself. But something deep inside whispered it wouldn't end there. That this man, this stranger, was about to become part of his life in ways he could never predict. And sure enough, Michael would soon find himself drawn back to that little house on the corner. What began as a single ride home was about to grow into something far greater. But why did Michael feel so connected to Mr. Whitaker so quickly? And what role would this bond play in revealing a truth buried for decades? That answer would come in time, starting with what happened next. Michael hadn't planned to see Mr. Whitaker again so soon. But over the next few days, the memory of that frail old man struggling under the streetlight kept tugging at his mind. Something about the way he had said, "son," lingered with him. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It carried weight, emotion, almost regret. So, the following weekend, Michael found himself pulling back into that quiet driveway on Maple Street, carrying a plate of his wife's pot roast covered in foil. He hesitated at the door, wondering if he was overstepping, then knocked gently. When the door creaked open, Mr. Whitaker's eyes widened in surprise. "Michael? I didn't expect to see you again." Michael smiled. "My wife made too much dinner. Thought I'd share." For a moment, the old man didn't answer. Then his shoulders relaxed, and a warmth softened his tired eyes. "Well, I suppose I can't turn down pot roast." That was the beginning. What started as a single visit turned into a habit. Michael would swing by once or twice a week, sometimes with a meal, sometimes just to check in. He'd help carry groceries, mow the lawn, or fix the squeaky back door. At first, Mr. Whitaker protested, insisting he didn't want to be a burden. But little by little, he began to look forward to those visits, even waiting by the window around the time Michael usually came. Their conversations deepened too. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, sipping coffee or iced tea, watching the world go by. "I served in the Navy," Mr. Whitaker said one night, his voice distant, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Saw more of the world than I ever imagined. The ocean, it teaches you things. Teaches you how small you really are. But it also took some of my closest friends. Men who never made it back." His words trailed into silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Michael nodded, listening carefully. He had always respected men who served, though he couldn't help but notice the shadow of grief in Mr. Whitaker's voice. On another evening, the old man spoke more personally. I made mistakes. Too many to count. There were people I cared about, people I should have held on to. But I didn't. And when I came back, life had moved on without me. Michael heard the regret in those words, felt it almost like his own. He leaned forward. Sometimes we all wish we could go back. But you can't live your life in the rearview mirror. Mr. Whitaker studied him quietly, then nodded with a faint smile. You remind me of someone I once knew. Someone I let slip away. Michael didn't know what to say, so he just sipped his coffee. But inside, he felt something he hadn't expected. A connection. The bond. Michael's own father had left when he was only a child. He had grown up watching his mother work 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. That absence, the father-shaped void, had never fully gone away. And here, sitting with this old man, Michael felt a strange sense of something filling that space. It wasn't just kindness anymore. It was a growing friendship. A relationship he didn't realize he needed. But as the weeks went by, Michael also noticed something else. Small hints, slips in conversation, moments when Mr. Whitaker seemed to stop himself mid-sentence. As though there was something he wasn't saying. Something he was holding back. And then, one Saturday afternoon while helping tidy up the attic, Michael would stumble upon the first clue, one that would shake him in a way he wasn't ready for. What was hidden in that attic box that would turn a simple act of kindness into a life-altering discovery? That answer was only moments away. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when most people were outside mowing their lawns or taking kids to soccer games. But Michael was in Mr. Whitaker's attic, sleeves rolled up, sweat beading on his forehead, surrounded by boxes coated in decades of dust. The attic smelled of mothballs and old wood. Shafts of sunlight pushed through the cracks in the wooden beams, cutting lines of gold across the clutter. Boxes were stacked high, some labeled with fading handwriting, winter clothes, books, Navy years. Others were unmarked, mysterious. Cobwebs stretched between the corners, and every step on the floorboards creaked with protest. Don't worry about all that, Mr. Whitaker called from below, his voice straining as he leaned on the banister. Most of it should have been thrown out years ago. Memories weigh more than people realize. Michael chuckled, brushing dust off his hands. I don't mind. Besides, it's good exercise. He bent down to lift a worn box tucked beneath a trunk. The cardboard sagged in his hands, nearly falling apart from age. Setting it carefully on the floor, he opened it and froze. Inside were stacks of photo albums, their covers frayed, corners curled. Michael flipped one open, and his eyes scanned page after page of black and white snapshots. Mr. Whitaker in uniform, standing proudly beside fellow sailors. Mr. Whitaker grinning with friends on a ship deck, youthful and strong, his posture commanding. There were postcards, ticket stubs, little scraps of a life lived long ago. But then, halfway through the album, Michael's hand stilled. A single photograph slipped loose, falling onto the wooden floor. He picked it up, brushed off the dust, and stared. It was Mr. Whitaker, younger, perhaps in his late 20s, standing beside a woman. She had light brown hair pulled neatly back, soft eyes, and a smile Michael knew far too well. His chest tightened. His breath caught. It looked almost exactly like his late mother. For a long moment, Michael just stared, his pulse quickening. No, it couldn't be. Could it? He turned the photo over. On the back, faint handwriting read only a date, nothing else. Find something interesting up there? Mr. Whitaker's voice drifted up from below, casual, unaware of the storm brewing in Michael's chest. Michael swallowed hard, slipping the photo back into the album. His mind raced. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. After all, plenty of people could resemble his mother, right? He climbed down slowly, carrying a box that wasn't the one with the photo. Just old pictures, he said, forcing his voice to sound light. Mr. Whitaker nodded, his expression unreadable. Just pictures of a life that feels like someone else's now. Michael smiled faintly, but inside, his thoughts churned. That picture, it couldn't be ignored. He knew his mother's face. He'd grown up with it, loved it, missed it every day since she passed. And now, he'd seen it beside this man. Driving home later, Michael couldn't shake the image. He replayed it in his mind over and over. The resemblance was uncanny, too close to dismiss. But why would his mother have known Mr. Whitaker? And why hadn't she ever mentioned him? Michael tried to push it aside, telling himself he was overthinking. Yet deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of it. He had stumbled onto something buried, something waiting in the shadows. And soon enough, Mr. Whitaker himself would reveal a truth Michael wasn't prepared to hear. What secret had this old man carried for decades? And why was Michael's late mother part of it? The answers were coming, and they would change everything. The photograph lingered in Michael's thoughts like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. His late mother, younger, smiling, standing beside Mr. Whitaker in a moment frozen decades before he was even born. He tried to dismiss it, tried to chalk it up to coincidence. But the more he thought about it, the less convincing that excuse became. His mother's eyes, her smile, the way she carried herself, it was unmistakable. And if that picture was real, then Mr. Whitaker wasn't just some lonely old man he'd helped out of kindness. He was someone tied to Michael's very existence. A week later, Michael found himself sitting in Mr. Whitaker's living room again. The old man looked especially tired that night, his breathing uneven, his hands trembling slightly as he poured tea into chipped mugs. They sat across from each other, silence stretching long between them. Finally, Mr. Whitaker spoke, his voice low, almost as though confessing to the air itself. "You remind me of someone I once loved. I never told you that, did I?" Michael's chest tightened. His instincts screamed that this was it. Whatever truth lay buried was about to surface. "Her name," Mr. Whitaker continued, his voice cracking, "was Anna. Anna Hayes. She was the brightest soul I ever knew. We met in the summer of '79. I was back on leave, full of big dreams and even bigger mistakes. She was kind to me, kinder than I deserved. We cared for each other more than I ever thought possible." Michael's breath caught. His mother's maiden name was Hayes. Mr. Whitaker's eyes welled with tears as he stared into the mug between his hands. "But I was young, foolish. I thought I had to choose between the Navy and a life with her. I left without saying goodbye. I told myself I'd write, and I did once. A letter. Poured my heart into it, but I never sent it. By the time I came back, she was gone. Moved away. And I didn't know she was pregnant." The room spun for Michael. "Pregnant?" Mr. Whitaker's hand trembled as he pulled open the drawer of a small side table. He took out a folded, yellowed envelope, its edges worn with time. "This was the letter. I kept it all these years, but it never reached her. Never reached your mother." Michael took the letter with shaking hands, staring at the name scrawled across the front, Anna Hayes. His mother's name. The silence in the room grew heavy. Slowly, Michael lifted his gaze to the man across from him. His throat tightened, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you saying you're my father?" Tears streamed down Mr. Whitaker's weathered cheeks. I didn't know. God help me, I didn't know. But when I saw you at that bus stop, the way you looked, the way you carried yourself, I felt it. I knew." His voice broke completely. "I am your father, Michael." The words hit like a storm. Michael sat frozen, his mind racing between disbelief and recognition. The photo, the letter, his mother's silence about the man who had left before he was born. It all made sense. Too much sense. And yet, sense didn't make it easier. Because now Michael had to face the truth. The man he had been helping out of kindness wasn't just a stranger. He was the father who had abandoned him before his first breath. But how do you forgive decades of absence? How do you reconcile the pain of growing up without a father with the frail, broken man sitting across from you now, begging for a chance to explain? Michael's emotions boiled, colliding, anger, grief, disbelief, compassion, all at once. And the question burned in his heart, what do I do with this truth? The answer wouldn't come easy, because the next choice he made would decide whether this story ended in bitterness or in healing. But could Michael bring himself to forgive the man who had left him behind before he even knew he existed? The words echoed in Michael's head long after Mr. Whitaker spoke them. "I am your father." They didn't settle easily. They didn't slide into place like a missing puzzle piece. No, they clashed, painfully, with every memory Michael had of his childhood. The late nights waiting for a father who never came home. The empty seat at school plays. The birthdays celebrated with only his mother, who always smiled bravely but whose eyes gave away the weight she carried. Now here he was, sitting in this dimly lit living room across from the man who should have been there all along. The man who had walked away before his life even began. Michael's chest tightened. His jaw clenched. His voice, when it finally broke the silence, trembled with anger. Do you have any idea what it was like? Growing up without a dad? Watching mom work herself to the bone just to keep food on the table? His voice rose, raw with years of unspoken hurt. Do you know how many nights I wished for someone, anyone, to be there? To show me how to throw a baseball? To teach me how to shave? To just be there? Mr. Whitaker flinched, his frail shoulders folding inward under the weight of Michael's words. Tears welled in his eyes, his hands trembling as he reached for the armrest to steady himself. I deserve every bit of your anger, he whispered hoarsely. I wasn't there. I should have been. And I can't take back those years. God knows I wish I could. But I'm running out of time, Michael. My health. His voice broke and he coughed weakly into his sleeve. I don't have long left. All I ask, his breath hitched as his eyes filled completely. All I ask is a chance to know you before it's too late. A chance to say I'm sorry. Michael turned his face away, blinking rapidly, his chest heaving. His hands clenched into fists on his knees. Part of him wanted to stand up, to walk out the door, to leave this man to his regrets, to protect himself from the storm of emotions threatening to tear him apart. But another part of him, deeper, quieter, saw something else. Not just the man who had abandoned him, but the broken figure in front of him now. Fragile. Alone. A man who looked at him not with excuses but with regret so heavy it nearly crushed him. Michael's mind raced. He thought of his mother, of the strength she had carried alone. He thought of the years of wondering why his father wasn't there, why he never came. And now he had his answer. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't make it right. But it made it real. Michael's voice softened, though it still trembled. Why now? Why tell me this now? Mr. Whitaker wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his voice breaking. Because kindness brought you into my life. And I realized I couldn't leave this world with the truth buried. You deserve to know. Even if it makes you hate me, you deserved the truth. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael stared at the floor, his thoughts swirling in chaos. Forgiveness felt impossible. But so did walking away. Could he really turn his back now? On a man who was asking not for excuses but for a chance. A chance to die with a sliver of peace, and maybe give his son the father he never had, even if only for a short time? Michael closed his eyes, his heart pounding, torn between rage and compassion. The decision would not come easily. But one thing was certain, whatever choice he made in that moment would shape not just the end of Mr. Whitaker's life, but the rest of his own. And the question hung heavy in the air, would Michael let bitterness define him, or choose forgiveness and discover healing he never thought possible? That choice, and the road it would lead to, would unfold soon. The days that followed were some of the hardest Michael had ever lived through. After that night, he didn't give his father an answer right away. He couldn't. The storm inside him was too strong. For hours after leaving the Whitaker house, Michael drove aimlessly through the city, headlights cutting through the dark, the words echoing in his mind, I am your father. Every red light felt longer. Every turn felt heavier. And with each mile, Michael found himself replaying his childhood, baseball games with no one cheering for him, nights sitting on the porch wondering if a dad he never knew would ever show up, watching other kids with their fathers and pretending he didn't care. That pain had lived in him for so long, it had almost become part of his identity. But now, sitting across from a man old and frail, riddled with regret, Michael realized he had a choice: to cling to the anger that had fueled him for decades, or to open the door to something harder, riskier, compassion. The next morning, Michael found himself back on that same porch. His hand hovered over the doorknob for a long moment before he finally turned it. The door creaked open, and there sat Mr. Whitaker in his chair by the window, a blanket draped over his thin frame, sunlight spilling across the room. Mr. Whitaker looked up, his eyes widening with surprise. For a moment, hope flickered across his tired face, as if he thought Michael might never return. Michael cleared his throat, the words thick in his chest. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But," he paused, staring at the man who had once been only a stranger, "I can't walk away either. You're my father. And I don't want your story, or mine, to end in bitterness." Mr. Whitaker's lips quivered as tears streamed down his cheeks. His voice broke into a whisper. "That's more than I deserve." From that day forward, Michael became a steady presence in the old man's life. He helped with groceries, drove him to doctor's appointments, and spent long evenings in that modest living room, listening to stories he had never heard before, stories of his father's younger days, of mistakes made and lessons learned too late. At first, Michael listened with a guarded heart. He nodded but said little, still weighed down by the years of absence. But as the days passed, he began to see not just the man who failed him, but the man who was trying, desperately, to make amends before it was too late. And in those small acts of care, making tea, adjusting pillows, sitting in silence when words were too heavy, something inside Michael began to shift. The anger didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. In its place grew something gentler, something he hadn't expected: peace. For Mr. Whitaker, those weeks were a gift. Every laugh they shared, every conversation that stretched late into the night, every quiet moment when Michael simply sat nearby, each one was a thread in the bridge he had longed to build for decades. A bridge back to the son he had lost before he ever knew him. The world outside went on as usual, neighbors mowing lawns, kids playing in the street, life continuing without pause. But inside that little house, two men, one young and still finding his place, one old and nearing the end of his journey, were rewriting their story. And though Michael still carried scars from the years of abandonment, he discovered something he never imagined he'd feel: a sense of belonging. For the first time in his life, he saw himself reflected in someone else, not in pain, but in presence. He had chosen not the easy road of resentment, but the harder path of reconciliation. And in doing so, both he and his father found something they thought they had lost forever: each other. Still, Michael knew the final chapter of this story was coming soon. His father's health was fragile, time was slipping away, and the question loomed heavy in his heart: how would he say goodbye when the moment came? The final weeks came faster than Michael expected. Mr. Whitaker's strength waned with each passing day. The once lively stories he told now came in shorter bursts, his voice softer, his hands trembling more with each cup of tea Michael placed in front of him. Still, Michael stayed. He read to him from old war letters, played soft music on the radio, and sometimes just sat in silence, letting the ticking clock fill the spaces where words no longer could. One late evening, as the autumn wind rustled through the trees outside, Mr. Whitaker reached for Michael's hand. His grip was weak, but his gaze was steady. His voice, though cracked, carried the weight of a lifetime. "Michael," he whispered, pausing to catch his breath, "I don't deserve the gift you've given me. Your forgiveness, your presence, you've given me more in these last few weeks than I ever gave you in all my years." Tears welled in Michael's eyes, but he swallowed hard, trying to stay strong. "You gave me something too, Dad. You gave me answers. And you gave me a chance to choose, to not let anger define me anymore." For the first time, Michael said the word, "Dad." And for the first time, Mr. Whitaker allowed himself to cry without shame. That night, before drifting into sleep, he whispered one final phrase: "I'm proud of you, son." Days later, Michael stood graveside as the crisp autumn air carried the soft rustle of leaves across the cemetery. A small gathering had come. Neighbors, a few fellow veterans, and Michael himself, the one who carried the deepest bond of all. As the pastor spoke, Michael wasn't filled with regret anymore. Instead, he felt gratitude. He had been given a chance, however late, to know the man behind the silence, to rewrite a story that could have ended in bitterness but instead ended in healing. After the service, Michael lingered. The crowd dispersed, the world moved on, but he remained by the simple headstone, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the name etched in stone. In his heart, He carried both the pain of the years lost and the peace of the weeks gained. He knew life rarely gave neat endings. But this was enough. A few days later, as Michael walked through his quiet neighborhood at dusk, he found himself passing the same bus stop where it all began. The evening light cast long shadows, and there, struggling with heavy grocery bags, was a woman, middle-aged, tired, trying to balance her load. Without hesitation, Michael stepped forward. "Here, let me help you with those." The woman looked up, surprised, then smiled with relief. "Oh, thank you. You don't know how much I needed that." Michael smiled back, taking the bags with ease. In that moment, he felt the full circle of kindness. A simple act had once led him to a secret he wasn't ready for. A secret that broke him, shaped him, and finally healed him. And now, here he was, passing that kindness forward, just as his father's memory deserved. As he placed the bags gently in the woman's car, Michael looked up at the fading sky, the colors of dusk painting the horizon. His voice was soft, but certain. Sometimes kindness opens doors to truths we never imagined. And though some secrets hurt, they can also heal. And with that, he walked on, ready to live his life with a new heart, one shaped not by anger, but by the kind of compassion that changes everything. Moral of this story reminds us that kindness has the power to change lives in ways we may never expect. A simple choice to help a stranger led Michael to uncover the truth about his own life. A truth that was painful, but also healing. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it can free us from carrying its weight. And sometimes, the family we think we've lost can still be found, even if only for a short while. The next time you see someone struggling, don't ignore it. That small act of kindness could open doors you never imagined. Remember, your compassion might not just change their life. It might change yours too. And remember, we're not just telling stories. We're changing lives.